Hey, well, welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. I'm back on the Dodge Dakota. It's been a few days since we did our walk around, and I've kind of started working on the front end here. Really started gaming over the ideas we can have for changing out the front suspension to accomplish what we're after. And I'm going to go over a few of those here for you. And the owner is happy with the idea of a 2-inch shorter setup. And I've got some pictures. So while you're looking at these pictures, what you're seeing is the front at stock height, and then the front 2 inches lower. And then I came back, I threw the rear tire that my brother would like to run on the back, and then also threw it up front with the piece of cardboard in there just to hide the suspension, because it throws your eye off and you can kind of get a good idea. I almost think he ought to run this big 325 tire all the way around, because I think it looks cool filling up here. We would have to modify the front frame horn to make that fit, but I'm willing to do it. Anyway, now that you've seen the pictures, seen the stance, what could we do to lower it? There aren't any kits. Option one is go in, take a spring like this, just cut off one full revolution, put it back in, see how that sits, cut off another revolution or half or whatever we'd need to until we get the right height he wants. Problem is, this is a 14-inch long spring, and every time you cut length off, you limit how much movement there is in the suspension, obviously, because we've shortened it. Well, the ride's going to get rougher. You don't have as much spring to compress, you don't have as much spring to rebound, and you're going to hit the bump stops fairly quickly. So additionally, you'd have to change out the shock. Now, this was already some KYB shocks, so they're a little upgrade from the factory, but we're looking at, we want to probably put some fully adjustable shocks in there, so that as he's driving it, he can get, you know, a street mode and a track mode, if you will. So option two was, we looked at some coilovers that would go in place of the factory shock. T-bar down here, same stem up here, probably a 2-inch overall shorter shock, and then used a spring that is the same 5.5-inch diameter at the top where it fits up into this bucket, and then the coil would shape down to 2.5-inch inside diameter, so that it would fit around the shock and would be a coil-over hybrid that mounts into this cup. They're available, and you can get them in pretty much any spring rate we need. Problem there is that spring is now very, very short. And again, we are just compromising our ride quality just for the lowering of the truck. So we kind of opted that that's not the best solution. Nobody makes a drop pin spindle, or we would jump on that idea. What we think we've decided to do is we're going to come in, and hopefully you can see my marks in here, but there's a chalk mark vertical right here, across the top, and vertical here. We're going to come in and we're going to cut this whole spring bucket area out. I'm going to come back and replate the frame for strength. Then I'm going to mount up on top here. I am going to make some kind of mount that comes up into the wheel well and lets us mount a shock with a regular bolt through a couple of tabs, just like we do the bottom of a 4-link or something like that in the rear. And that gives us an upper mount. And then at the bottom, what we would do is take the factory control arm, cut a large round hole in it where the spring perch used to be, and add 2 tabs there so we can put another bolt through and get a long coilover in here. And the idea being that we want, if the factory shock is basically 14 inches long, we want 16, 18, 20 inches of shock in here so we can get a long spring and a lighter load per inch, because we have more spring that can compress. So still playing with spring rates and all of that, but you know, that'll be a little while. The idea is we could use a factory lower control arm and just put tabs on it, and then have this coilover in here that's infinitely adjustable, and getting the length gives us the ability to lower the truck while still having lots of room for compression and expansion in the spring. Option two, or option B, or whatever, is we'll make some custom lower and possibly upper control arms to kind of fit around everything we're doing here. We're going to be cutting all these bump stop areas off. We'll still have to put some kind of bump stop in here. We may even be able to get a bump stop and put it inside the coilover unit, so that that's all kind of integrated and makes a little more simple, you know, component. made a piece to go inside the frame there to leave room for the coil-over spring we're going to be using. Hey guys, so I thought I'd just add a little more information to what's going on here. So I've already reworked the frame. That's welded up and done. I've reinstalled loosely the factory suspension, and I'm just trying to run it up and down with no bump stops to stop anything. Also have the camber set approximately where it would be to be on the street. So we're just going to try and get a rough idea of how much suspension movement we have, which is 13 1/4, and that's the lower control arm essentially hitting the frame support or frame mount that it is attached to. And if we go all the way down, with that braced in there, let's see if we can pull a measurement now. So it goes to 22 3/4, so. And about 13 1/4 roughly, all the way up. So that gives us 9.5 inches total travel up to down. We're not going to be using anywhere near that, but it is nice to know how much is in there. So this is mostly for curiosity purposes. We're going to go to the other side now. Loosely reassembled the factory suspension before I work on any of the frame, and let's see how much suspension travel we could have had on a factory original truck. So go to the other side here. All right, so now on a factory stock minus the shock and the spring, of course, so that we can actually move this, we have 21 1/4 at the bottom, and this is currently sitting on the bump stop that's up under the top A-arm. That is tight up against the bump stop on the bottom here. And you can see it didn't move very much, but we are 17 inches. So 17, which leaves us a total bump stop to bump stop of 4 1/4 inch travel. So any more travel that we get than that is, you know, probably ends up putting us into some bump steer, but we're looking at probably 6 inches that we're going to use on the other side of the truck, well, and this side as we start redoing this stuff. So it's pretty interesting that with bump stops you get 4 1/4, and it would, those bump stops would compress. We would probably get a little more on the top and a little more on the bottom as we really tried to compress those with, you know, in a corner or whatever, turning hard. But still not going to have more than, say, 5 inches total with the compressed bump stops. It's just a little interesting information to add to our knowledge about the truck and what we're doing as far as suspension. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and strip this stuff back off. It only takes a couple minutes. And then we'll get our cut lines laid out and get this side cut, welded up, matching the other side. I've got tubing on order because I've decided I'm going to go ahead and remake at least the upper control arm, but probably going to end up remaking both control arms just so I can get a little more space in and around them. I was going to end up cutting so much of the upper one away, wouldn't have really been usable. We are going to reuse factory ball joints and then the factory dog bone up there at the top of the A-arm, and then we'll use factory bushings and ball joint on the lower so that we can kind of keep everything, you know, keep things to where they're replaceable with factory parts. So You guys, welcome back. I'm working back on the Dakota here, and what I'm doing today is working on making a shock tower. So what I'm trying to do is get a shock tower made so that I can move this truck off the lift, get it set up on some jack stands and get it leveled so I can work the rear suspension, as well as do any more tweaks on the front that I need. So this is some 1.25 inch round DOM tubing, 1/8 inch wall, 125. And what I'm going to do is build a fairly basic shock hoop, which is basically going to come up, it's going to come up about 8 inches on the back side, make about a 70-degree bend, come straight across, and then another 70-degree bend and come down about 5 inches because the frame is kind of going uphill at that point. And so one leg's going to be a little longer than the other. It gets it kind of level with the engine, and then I can just add tabs basically on the back side, on the engine side of this tube. That gets everything out of the way, gives room for the shock, and leaves room for the upper A-arm. So I'm going to throw this in. I didn't do this last week because I was waiting on dies for this. Alright, so let's get this bent. We're going to bend it as far as it'll go on the first pin, which is about 72 degrees. So there's one side, 72 degrees or so. We're going to do, I'm going to measure from this mark now to my other side, and we'll put it in, bend it. There we go. Now we got to fit it inside the truck. All right, I've worked this tube over a few different times, probably 6-7 times. Just getting these angles right on here, and then this is going to sit up in here. And we've got to make some marks so we can get it centered up and lined up, but that's pretty close to where it's going to go. I'll have to tweak the angle just a little bit, but I've got everything pretty close. So I need to clean the paint off the top of the frame rails, and then we can tack this in and then check the angle, make sure it matches the other side. Once that's done, then we can weld this in, get a couple of real good tacks on it and weld it in. But first, we need to get the A-arm sitting in here so that we can get the gap right on both sides. So with the A-arm in there, what we got to do is set this hoop in here. We're just trying to get it even front to back. This bar top is real close to being the same angle as the engine is. So it's hard to say, you know, should it be level? It could be level up here, then it doesn't line up with anything else. And we're just welding tabs onto it for a coilover shock, which is going to be in here somewhere. So it doesn't really matter what this angle is, just as long as we can, you know, reasonably duplicate it on both sides. And all I'm after on this first time is just to get some good tack welds in here. Alright, I just wanted to point out that you guys need to realize that this is a lot of trial and error. Mostly error. This is the third time that I'm tacking this on, and I've shortened the front of this bar about 1/8 of an inch total now, just trying to get the angle up here to be pretty close. The other side is real close to 4 degrees. This side is going to be about 4.3. I could shorten it up a little bit. I just wanted to point out that, you know, as many times as I've done this over the years, you know, different projects, it's not a hit it, you know, do it one time and it's done. You end up going back and forth quite a few times. So I think I'm actually going to take just a little bit more off this front side to get the bar to come down just a little bit more. Maybe another 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to mark it, take off about another 1/8. We're aiming for just a little under 4 degrees there. I put a little gap here. More importantly, we're aiming for 56 degrees out here. Alright, I got the angle at exactly 56 degrees. The other side is at like 56.1 or something. This angle's at 3.65. The other side is at 3.6, 3.7. We're within 1/10%. I am content with that. And be sure that's not going to move. And then I need to make, well, actually I've already made the tabs that go off the back side. I just need to come up with get the lower control arm mounted, and I've kind of made some L brackets that I'll show you that bolt to the original T-bar shock mount. And that's just to give me something to bolt, to gauge off of. I need to cut the top center out of the upper control arm so that my rod will go through there, and then I can line up for these tabs and get those tacked on. And you can see on the bottom of this, just bolted a couple of pieces of angle iron that have some holes through them. Right now they're just 7/16 holes. I don't know whether the shocks will be 7/16 or 1/2 inch or even 9/16, but we can do everything with 7/16. This for now. Put this in here. And then that along with the jack stand. Let me get roughly, and then we just need a bar, piece of 1-inch square tubing to come up between these and up to here, and we can mount our tabs, which I cut out on the plasma table. And those are going to go on the back side. So again, a 7/16 bolt. So let me see, I can't remember how long I needed the tube for. Alright, so here's my temporary shock, and it's too long. It's 16.5 inches long. It's going to put a lot of lift in the truck, but it's not really that big a deal. What I'll do is come back and drill yet another hole in it when I figure out, oops. I can drill another hole in it when I know for sure what shock we're using and at what ride height that's going to be, or at the ride height, what its extension is going to be, which is probably more like 15 or something. So, but for now, this is probably going to get me a good start. I'm going to take my tabs, bolt them through the shock. Really need a longer bolt. And then we're going to tack these on. Get you a few pictures of both sides. But for now, this is enough. I can't obviously hang the spindle on here yet without putting the upper control arm back on. But all I got to do is take the shock mount out, or the fake shock, this bar out of the way, lay the A-arm up in there, bolt it down, and then I could put the shock back through it, because we cut that upper part out, that big half circle or whatever, and then this will hold with the spindle, will hold a tire. I could put the truck back down on the ground, move it around. These shock tabs may need, I think they probably need to be a little wider. I need to check and see what brand for sure we're going to do on the shocks, and then set these tabs the right width apart with just some spacers. So on the bottom and actually on the top with that A-arm that I just cut out, we're going to make new A-arms, and we're going to kind of mimic the factory shape, but we're going to do it out of tubing. So we'll be bending some more tubing here soon, and we're going to reuse, we're not reusing anything, we've got new bushings, the factory type bushings, so we're going to make some sleeves for those to go into so we can use a factory type bushing, and we're going to use a factory ball joint on the top and bottom, so we have some factory parts if we need to replace them. My brother wants to keep it all rubber bushings and everything just for the ride quality, and then if he gets serious about tracking the truck or whatever, then maybe he'll change those out to like polyurethane or something like that. So